In 1944, a secret British machine cracked German codes at speeds no one believed possible. This was years before Silicon Valley would even dream of computers. Tommy Flowers and his team risked their careers to invent Colossus in war-torn Britain, delivering intelligence that helped decide D-Day. But after victory, official orders demanded every trace of this world-changing breakthrough be destroyed, as if it had never existed. Why would Britain erase its greatest technological edge? And what future did we all lose when Colossus was silenced? The answer begins with the people who built the impossible. Tommy Flowers worked in a world of wires and switches, not in a university laboratory, but at the post office research station in Dollis Hill. His hands were more used to the grit of telephone exchanges than to the ink of academic papers. Before the war, Flowers designed circuits that kept Britain's phone calls moving day and night. He learned something simple but radical, that if you never switched a valve off, it almost never failed. Reliability was everything to him. Most engineers thought a machine with hundreds, let alone thousands of fragile glass valves would burn itself out in hours. Flowers thought otherwise. He had seen telephone exchanges run for years, valves glowing and circuits humming, as long as the power stayed on. That stubbornness set him apart. When the call came from Bletchley Park asking, could a machine be built to break a code the Germans believed unbreakable, Flowers did the unthinkable. He promised not just speed, but reliability. No one else dared to bet on so many valves. The post office gave him a budget, but it was not enough. Flowers believed in the idea so deeply that he took money from his own pocket to buy parts the government would not pay for. He signed off requisitions, paid suppliers, and kept the receipts in his desk drawer. The risk was personal. If it failed, his career would be over, his reputation in ruins, and every penny lost. But if it worked, he would have built something the world had never seen. This was a risk he was willing to take. Through the winter of 1943, the Dollis Hill team worked in secrecy. Flowers' lab diaries show the pressure, late nights, blown fuses, and the constant worry that one valve would bring down the whole machine. But the design held. The trick was to keep everything running. No cold starts, no power cuts. The circuits were robust, the wiring meticulous, the layout modelled on the best of British telecoms engineering. Flowers' faith in continuous power made Colossus possible. On 8 December 1943, the prototype came to life, its racks of valves glowing in the gloom, reading test messages at speeds no one had witnessed before. The room must have felt like a small revolution. The speed was undeniable. In January 1944, under armed guard, the first Colossus was dismantled, loaded onto a lorry, and driven north through blackout Britain. On 18 January 1944, it arrived at Bletchley Park. A memo from Newman that day reads simply, "Colossus arrives today." For Flowers, it was not just a delivery. It was the arrival of a new kind of machine born of stubbornness, practical genius, and a willingness to risk everything for an idea. The future of code breaking, and perhaps the war itself, now rested on what this machine could do. The mathematicians were waiting, but it was an engineer's gamble that made the impossible real. William Tutte was 24 years old and newly arrived at Bletchley Park when the Lorenz cipher first crossed his desk. The intercepted messages were unlike anything the codebreakers had seen. 12 streams of binary endlessly shifting, with no machine in sight. The Germans called it the Schlüsselzusatz, but the British gave it a nickname, Tutte. Tutte had never seen the Lorenz device itself. He had only the encrypted messages and the patterns within them. Over months of pencil and paper work, he mapped the logic of the cipher, deducing that the enemy machine used 12 rotating wheels, each with its own set of pins, to generate the stream of scrambled characters. It was a feat of pure reasoning. No blueprints, no captured hardware, just the statistical shadows left by German operators. By 1942, Tutte's diagrams of the wheel patterns gave the Allies their first foothold into the heart of Hitler's most secret communications. But deduction alone could not keep up with the flood of intercepted traffic. Each message, thousands of characters long, demanded weeks of calculation. The war would not wait. Newman, a mathematician from Cambridge, saw that only a machine could match the speed and complexity now required. In early 1943, Newman drafted a proposal for an electronic device that could automate Tutte's methods, a machine that would test thousands of wheel settings in the time it took a human to check one. He sent his requirements to Dollis Hill, where Tommy Flowers and his team were already wrestling with the practicalities of high-speed logic. The new section at Bletchley Park, soon called the Newmanry, became the epicenter of mechanized code-breaking. Newman's memos from the spring of 1943 describe a place in flux where mathematicians, engineers, and a growing cadre of Women's Royal Naval Service operators, known as the Wrens, worked side by side. The Wrens arrived in shifts, learning to thread paper tape through the prototype machines, set switches, and monitor the counters that would signal a possible break. Their hands turned theory into action, hour after hour, eyes stinging in the blue-white glow of the valve racks. Tutte's 12-wheel insight was now the blueprint for everything that followed. The diagrams he drew became the foundation for the logic circuits that Flowers and his team would wire into Colossus. Newman's vision for a laboratory, part maths department, part factory, took shape as the first machines arrived, each one larger and more ambitious than the last. The Newmanry was soon running around the clock, its operators feeding in fresh reels of intercepted tunny traffic, its mathematicians refining the tests that would tease out the enemy's secrets. By early 1944, the pieces were in place. Tutte's mental leap, Newman's organizational drive, Flowers' engineering audacity, and the steady hands of dozens of Wrens. The scale of the challenge had outgrown any single mind or method. Only by combining deduction, machinery, and relentless teamwork could Bletchley Park hope to keep pace with the coded orders moving between Berlin and the front. The next step would demand not just new machines, but an entire infrastructure, rooms filled with racks, miles of wiring, and a discipline that blurred the line between human and electronic speed. June 1st, 1944. In a sealed room at Bletchley Park, the second generation of Colossus roared to life. Mark II was no mere upgrade. It was a leap. The racks now held around 2,400 valves, each one glowing, each one a risk that had once seemed unthinkable. The engineers, drawn from the post office's best, had built a machine whose logic pulsed through miles of wire and thousands of soldered joints. At its heart, a shift register circuit, a new kind of memory able to hold and juggle streams of data at dizzying speed. The numbers told their own story. Mark II could read punched paper tape at 25,000 characters per second, a blur of holes and light that no human eye could follow. The tape looped endlessly on its bedstead, guided by tension arms and spools, while photoelectric cells, borrowed from anti-aircraft fuse technology, turned each gap and punch into a pulse of electricity. The raw ciphertext poured into the shift register, where thyrotron rings spun out virtual wheels, mimicking the enemy's cipher machine in pure electronics. The result was speed and scale no one had seen before. This was not a single machine, but the beginning of a fleet. By the end of the war, 10 Colossi stood at Bletchley, each one assembled in secret, each one delivered by lorry under armed guard. Engineering memos from Dollis Hill tracked every shipment, racks, valves, relays, power supplies, all logged and signed for. The technical drawings, some now lost, some rescued in fragments, showed a logic system that could run 100 calculations in parallel, checking possibilities at a pace no mathematician could match. Reliability was the quiet miracle. The old fear that so many valves would fail in hours proved unfounded. Flowers' doctrine of constant power, steady voltage, and careful layout meant that Colossus could run for days, even weeks, with only minor repairs. Operators learned to trust the rhythm of the machine, the whir of the tape, the click of relays, the sudden chatter of the teleprinter when a break was found. Mark II was not a universal computer, but for its task, testing Boolean patterns against intercepted cipher streams, it was unmatched. The British had built the world's fastest electronic codebreaker, operational on the eve of D-Day. 10 machines, each one a fortress of logic and light, stood ready to read the enemy's secrets at a speed that changed the very nature of war. Colossus changed the rhythm of war. Before its arrival, a single intercepted Lorenz message could take weeks to unravel. By the summer of 1944, the time from interception to intelligence report had collapsed to mere hours. Shift logs from the Newman tell of tapes arriving at dawn, run through Mark II at speeds that blurred the paper into a pale grey ribbon. Operators, most of them young women whose hands were steady from practice, threaded tape, set switches, and waited for the counters to climb. The machine's appetite was relentless, 25,000 characters per second, each one a possible crack in the enemy's armour. June 1944 brought an urgency that no one in the huts could ignore. In the days before D-Day, Colossus worked around the clock, swallowing reels of intercepted traffic from Berlin to the Channel coast. The decrypts that emerged were not just numbers, they were snapshots of German thinking, troop deployments, and the false trails laid for Allied eyes. One case from early June stands out. A Tutte message, decrypted in less than 2 hours, revealed that Hitler's command still expected the main Allied landing at Pas-de-Calais, not Normandy. This single fact, confirmed by Colossus, gave Allied planners the confidence to press ahead with Operation Overlord. The deception had worked. The beaches would not be reinforced in time. Behind the scenes, the logistics of feeding the machines became an operation in itself. Tape reels arrived from interception stations across the country, bundled and logged by hand. Analysts in the Newman triaged the traffic, prioritizing messages marked urgent for immediate processing. The workflow was relentless. Tape in, settings adjusted, Boolean tests configured, counters watched. When the teleprinter rattled to life and spat out a string of settings and counts, the room would pause. Each printout meant a possible break, a wheel setting that matched, a path into the heart of the enemy's plans. The scale of throughput was staggering. By the end of June, 10 Colossi were running in parallel, each one handling its own stream of traffic, each one reducing days of manual calculation to a morning's work. The intelligence they produced shaped decisions at the highest level, from Eisenhower's headquarters down to the field commanders waiting for a signal to move. The war's tempo had shifted. With Colossus, the Allies could read the enemy's intentions almost as fast as they were written. For a brief electric moment, Britain held a technological advantage the world had never seen. May 1945. The war in Europe ends, and with it, the world's most advanced computing machines face an abrupt reckoning. In the corridors of Whitehall and the code-breaking offices now transitioning to peacetime, a new fear takes hold, not of German ciphers, but of secrets falling into the wrong hands. The government's security chiefs, acting under the weight of the Official Secrets Act and the unblinking anxiety of the Cold War's first breaths, draft their orders. Colossus must vanish. No single directive bearing Churchill's signature survives in the archives, but the intent is unmistakable in cabinet notes and the terse language of GCHQ policy. All but 2 Colossi are to be dismantled into such small parts that their use could not be inferred. The machines that turned the tide at Bletchley Park are now seen as liabilities. Their racks, once alive with the glow of 2,400 valves, are stripped bare by the same engineers who built them. Power is cut, cables are pulled, panels are unscrewed and stacked for removal. The process is methodical, almost surgical. Each piece is separated, each circuit board is returned to the post office or consigned to scrap. The logic is clear. If no trace remains, there is nothing for a foreign agent to discover, nothing for a future adversary to exploit. Tommy Flowers receives a categorical order: destroy all documentation. In his later account, he describes burning the original drawings and circuit diagrams in a furnace, the paper curling into ash. The destruction is not a single event, but a campaign carried out over months, with the last mechanical drawings deliberately burned as late as 1960. Of the 10 Colossi built, only 2 are spared. These are moved under heavy guard, first to Eastcote, then to Cheltenham, hidden deep within the new heart of British signals intelligence. For decades, their existence is a secret, even among those who built them. The story of Colossus does not end with victory, it ends in silence, by official design. The machines disappear, their story locked away under layers of security that will not lift until the 1970s. For 30 years, the world forgets that Britain once held the future in its hands, and then let it slip through its fingers. February 1946. In Philadelphia, crowds gathered to witness the unveiling of ENIAC, a machine the American press hailed as the world's first electronic computer. Cameras flashed, politicians beamed, and the headlines wrote themselves. Yet in Britain, the true first stood in ashes and memory, its story locked behind the Official Secrets Act. For decades, Colossus was a ghost. Its engineers and operators kept their silence. Its blueprints were gone, its racks dismantled, its name missing from the textbooks that shaped a new digital world. The wound was quiet but deep, a kind of national amnesia, enforced by law and habit. By the 1970s, the silence began to crack. Retired codebreakers, emboldened by the slow thaw of official secrecy, started to speak. Old photographs surfaced in attics and archives. Hints of a lost machine flickered through academic journals and the letters pages of computer magazines. But the details were scattered, the story incomplete. No working Colossus survived, and the technical drawings had been deliberately burned in 1960. The world's first computer, rebuilt from fragments if at all, would have to rise from almost nothing. In the early 1990s, Tony Sale, a former GCHQ engineer, took up the challenge. Sale was not a man content with legend. He wanted valves to glow and tape to run. Armed with just 8 wartime photographs, scraps of circuit diagrams saved in secret by engineers who had quietly defied orders, and the fading memories of those who had once tended the machines, he set out to reconstruct Colossus Mark II. Piece by piece, he sourced obsolete valves, rebuilt the bedstead tape transport, and puzzled over every missing detail. The project was painstaking, sometimes maddening, a detective story written in solder and steel. Sale's notebooks from the time read like a catalogue of near misses and small victories. A rare thyrotron found at a radio fair, a logic board recreated from a smudged photo, a wiring error chased for weeks before a single lamp finally blinked to life. After nearly a decade, the replica Colossus powered up inside Block H at Bletchley Park. Visitors to the National Museum of Computing can now watch it in action. The paper tape whirring, the valves glowing, the counters clicking as they once did in wartime. It is not a resurrection. The past cannot be fully reclaimed, but it is a kind of homecoming. Britain's achievement, once buried, stands in public view at last. The pride is real, but so is the ache. For every visitor who marvels at the machine, there is the quiet question, what if the world had known when it still mattered? Today, Britain leads in quantum computing research, yet the silence around Colossus lingers. Every innovation stands on erased blueprints, proof that secrecy can steal futures as easily as it guards them. The digital world moves faster than ever, but its foundation was built on stories almost lost. Sometimes the greatest breakthroughs are the ones we nearly let vanish. Tell us, what future should never be hidden again?